Hi, my name's Victoria and welcome to Eyes on Crime. Today we're covering the case of Elizabeth Barraza, a 29-year-old woman from Tomball, Texas. On the morning of January 25th, 2019, while setting up for a garage sale outside of her home, Liz was brutally murdered by an unknown assailant. The attack was caught on camera, yet to this day, her killer has not been identified or held accountable. Liz was the victim of a cold-blooded execution, but more importantly, she was a wife, a daughter, a friend, and a beloved member of the Star Wars costuming community, the 501st Legion. In this episode, I'll be recapping my interview with her father, Bob Nuelle, and hopefully shedding more light on the case, and more about who Liz was as a person. Bob has spent the last several years fighting tirelessly to keep his daughter's story alive. Before we get started, I want to take a minute and share this message with you, just in case you don't make it until the end of the video. Bob gave me permission to tell you that he has received a cancer diagnosis. Bob is currently in active treatment, and right now, the prognosis is uncertain. For years, Bob has been fighting for justice, but his diagnosis has only strengthened his determination. So everyone, let's rally around Bob and help him. Please take a moment and share this video, or find another one. It doesn't have to be mine. Find one on YouTube about Liz and share it. Share it on Reddit, Facebook, anywhere. Let's get the word out there. Let's flood the internet with Liz's story so that everyone hears about it. We need people to send in tips. Let's get this case solved. I've been following Liz's case from the beginning. I think I've listened to every single interview that Liz's parents, Bob and Rosemary, have ever done. I've also watched as many YouTube videos covering the case as I can find online. I've always thought that Bob and Rosemary seemed so genuinely sweet, down to earth, and just easy to talk with. Like the kind of people you'd love to meet for a cup of coffee or a good conversation. Although I've only had the chance to meet with Bob via Zoom, I have to say, meeting him did not disappoint. He was just as genuine as I had imagined, and I'm extremely grateful he took the time to meet with me so that I could learn more about Liz, his family's fight for justice, and so that I'm able to share some of that information with all of you. Bob and I met for almost an hour and a half, and he was very clear that he and his family have a policy not to speculate. Bob told me, "We have a policy that we don't discuss speculation. It's all speculation. No one has been ruled out during the investigation, so everyone is still suspect. And as such, our commitment to Michael Ritchie is that we will never discuss anything that's speculation about the case. We will just stick with the facts." So out of respect for that, I made sure that our conversation stayed focused only on the facts about the case. As we discuss the facts of this case, I strongly encourage you to review them for yourself. You can find the full timeline and details on the official website, which is www.whokilledlizbarraza.com. When I asked Bob what he would like people to know about his daughter, how she was as a friend, a person, or maybe something most people don't know, he said, to characterize Liz, you have to understand what was important to her. And Liz never turned down an opportunity to help a person if she felt safe doing it and if she felt it was something that she could do about it. As many of you know, Liz was a member of the group called the 501st Legion, which is a professional Star Wars costuming group. Bob is part of it too. To join, you have to build a costume that matches the Lucasfilm on-screen guidelines. Bob told me that his TIE Fighter pilot costume cost around $1,500 to $1,800, and that a really good level 3 Darth Vader can run $6,000 or $7,000. I was surprised to learn how much time, money, and heart members put into it. At first, I thought it was just about fandom, but Bob made it clear that there's so much more behind it. Yes, members are diehard Star Wars fans, geeks in the best sense of the word, as he put it, but they're also committed to giving back through a tremendous amount of charity work. They pour their time, money, and energy into visiting children and adult oncology wards, showing up at birthday parties for kids with cancer, and even attending bell-ringing ceremonies to celebrate when a child finishes treatment. Parents can call and ask for stormtroopers, Darth Vader, or the 501st to show up. That was the world that Liz loved, where fandom and compassion collided, where something as simple as a costume lifted spirits, and Bob said that she embraced it completely. One of the best examples of this happened at the Houston convention called Comic Palooza, where Liz was serving as the event coordinator, and the 501st had a huge booth there, given to them by the convention because they're a huge draw. Everybody wants their pictures taken with Darth Vader and with stormtroopers and robots and everything. So this group of people came up and they were looking really distressed. So Liz asked them if there's anything she can help them with. They said that there was a problem with their booth. We're doing a fundraiser for the children in Venezuela. They're starving and they need shoes, and it seems like there's some mess up with our booth. Liz didn't hesitate. She told them to give her a few minutes, and she got to work. She went up to her group and asked if they could spare about 4 feet of their booth and a couple of chairs. Then she went to the other group on the opposite side and asked if they could spare another 5 feet or so and a chair or two. By the time she was done, she had carved out an entire booth so the charity could set up and fundraise properly. About 2 hours later, a 7-foot, 2-inch guy walked over and asked to see the little girl who got them their booth space. And they all pointed to Liz. And she walked up and immediately he says, "I'm Peter Mayhew, the actor that played Chewbacca." Liz was stunned. Peter invited her and her husband to a pizza party in his room that night. From that day on, the Mayhew family welcomed Liz into their lives. She was invited to their 4th of July celebrations, welcomed into their home, and her husband even had a piece of his artwork placed in Peter's museum. Anytime they came to Houston or anywhere nearby, they called on Liz, and she would drop everything to help them. As Bob put it, that's who Liz was. Hearing this gave me a better sense of Liz's world. The costumes were just the surface. It was all about kindness, connection, and finding ways to lift others up. She lived a life of daily service. And it wasn't just big events. Liz carried that generosity in everyday life moments. Bob and Rosemary had always taught her if you ever saw a police officer or a service member in uniform, say at Starbucks or McDonald's, you step in front of them and pay their bill no matter what the amount. On a family trip to Pensacola Naval Air Station, they stopped to eat. At a nearby table was a young soldier, barely 18, with his mother, talking about deployment. Liz noticed them and quietly paid their bill anonymously. Bob also described Liz as very silly. I think we all got a glimpse of that when she came back from getting her coffee, the morning when she was murdered, playfully looking into the camera and making a funny face. Bob said she would do the silliest of things, often just to make others laugh. She had a little dachshund named Diesel. She loved that dog to a fault. Diesel went everywhere with her, and she spoiled him rotten. Liz also had a close-knit group of friends who adored her. After her death, investigators combed through her social media, text messages, and phone records and online presence, searching for answers. What they found was striking. Not a single negative thing. No drama, no grudges, no hidden conflicts. Just kindness, laughter, and a woman who poured her energy into others. Liz and Sergio loved to go to Orlando. In fact, Liz was killed on the 25th, and just 2 days later, on the 27th, they were supposed to leave for their 5th wedding anniversary trip. The airfare, hotel, meals, and even the VIP passes for Disney and Universal Studios had already been fully paid for. That's the kind of person Liz was, raised from an early age to never spend money she didn't have. So when Liz decided to have the garage sale, it wasn't because she needed the money. She just wanted a little extra spending cash for the anniversary trip. Financially, she was incredibly responsible. At the time of her death, the only debt that had to be discharged was a privately held credit card that she occasionally used, mostly to buy gifts for Sergio so he wouldn't see the charges on their shared accounts. That balance was only about $500. Other than that, they had no credit card debt. Around 2 a.m., a truck drove past Liz and Sergio's house, captured on a home security camera. Bob believes this was to see what vehicle Sergio was driving, since sometimes he took a work van and other times he took his black Toyota Tundra. Later that morning, the same truck returned to the neighborhood. It was first seen pulling into the Goddard School parking lot around 6:47 a.m., right at the subdivision's main entrance. Unfortunately, none of the cameras were working. Bob and Rosemary think that the driver noticed the cameras and got spooked. The truck left and re-entered the neighborhood through another entrance off Kirkendall Road. From that spot, the driver would have had a clear view of Sergio leaving for work. Sergio's routine was to meet his crew at a Lowe's hardware store because it had a lot of parking, and also sometimes they needed to pick up supplies for the day job. That Lowe's was about 20 minutes from their home. Sergio left for work in his white panel van around 6:48. Within 2 minutes, the truck pulled up in front of Liz's house. The driver made a three-point turn that conveniently obscured the license plate, then parked behind her car, close enough to the driveway but angled just out of the Ring camera's best view. The video shows the driver getting out and walking towards Liz, setting up for the garage sale. The doorbell audio picked up Liz greeting the person with a simple "morning." Bob explained that as a costumer, Liz had an eye for detail. She could recognize people by the way they walked or swung their arms. If she had known who the person was, she would have said their name. "Good morning, Frank." The fact that she didn't suggests that she just thought it was an early customer. The shooter spoke briefly, about 6 to 8 seconds, and then fired 4 shots, all which hit Liz. The first shot was at point-blank range, within 4 feet. It grazed her neck, hit the brick near the garage, and deflected into the wood above the door. Bob believes it was aimed at her vocal cords to prevent her from screaming, but he thinks Liz flinched at the last second, causing the shot to miss its intended mark. Even so, the bullet still grazed her before ricocheting. Police later recovered the bullet. Bob and Rosemary didn't even realize where it had landed until days later, when they returned to the house to collect clothes for Sergio. They noticed the police evidence marker above the garage door and saw the hole themselves. The second and third shot both hit Liz in the chest, missing her lungs directly, but scattering enough shrapnel that her lungs could not be donated. She collapsed onto the driveway. For the fourth shot, the shooter stood over Liz as she laid on the concrete and fired it into her head. Point-blank range, barely a foot away, execution style, without hesitation. The shooter then ran back to the truck and sped off. Several neighbors heard the shots, and at least 4 different households called 911. One of Liz's next-door neighbors thought the sounds had come from inside their own home. The wife rushed down to check the son's room, terrified he had accidentally fired a weapon. Her husband then looked outside, saw Liz lying on the driveway, and made a split-second decision to run to her. Bob said that he was in awe of the neighbor's courage, walking into danger unarmed, never knowing if the shooter's truck might circle back at any second. Still, the neighbor knew it was important to get close enough to Liz to assess the situation and get help. At 7:19 a.m., after the shooting, Liz's house alarm was triggered. Bob clarified that it wasn't Liz setting it off. It happened when the police entered to clear the house and make sure the shooter wasn't hiding inside. Still, he and Rosemary disagreed on whether Liz had intentionally set the alarm that morning or not. Bob believed she turned it on so that if she was attacked in the driveway or garage, all she would have to do was open the door to the house and the alarm would be immediately triggered. However, Rosemary believes that Liz simply had a habit of leaving it on. so she'd be alerted if someone slipped into the house while she was outside holding a garage sale transaction. In the aftermath, detectives summed up Liz in the simplest, most powerful way. One of them described Liz as pure innocent. She had no criminal record, no dangerous activity, and was known as someone who went out of their way to avoid trouble. Bob said she was always safety conscious, something she got from her mom. Bob is certain this was no random crime. He believes it was a professional hit and warns people not to be fooled into thinking otherwise. He walked me through it step by step. The killer used a .38 revolver, no brass casings, no evidence trail. All 4 shots were fired one-handed, steady, with the other hand down at the shooter's side. To Bob, that control showed someone highly trained. 4 deliberate shots in total, with the last one to the head. He even pointed out that Liz's cash box, sitting right there with about $100 inside, was never touched. Nothing was stolen. For Bob, it's proof that this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was a professional hit. Investigators also ruled out gang involvement early on. Both the FBI and the sheriff's gang unit looked into it, but Bob said that they were clear. If this had been tied to any gang activity, the community would have known about it immediately. To further support the theory that this was a hired hit, Bob pointed to the escape. It wasn't sloppy or panicked. It was carefully planned, tightly organized, and carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. One neighbor who called 911 reported seeing the black Nissan truck take off, only to circle back less than a minute later. That detail stayed with Bob. He believes the driver may have been listening to police scanners. As officers started converging on the main entrance to the subdivision, the shooter could have picked up on the radio chatter and switched quickly to a pre-planned secondary exit. Another neighbor's home security camera caught the truck turning into a cul-de-sac, but never recorded the vehicle leaving. Based on that footage, also based on Aaron Stoner's YouTube video, Bob explained that the driver most likely escaped through a green belt running behind the homes. The path connects Kirkendall Road, giving the shooter a fast and discreet way out. If that's what happened, they would have been nearly a mile south of police within minutes. Bob shared another story about how much people appreciated Liz's generosity even after she was gone. Because her murder was so brutal, the hospital didn't register her under her real name at first. They didn't want the people who killed Liz to be able to call and find out if she was still alive. Instead, they used a protective name. And when her organ donation was green-lighted, they changed it to an alias, Eleanor Berry, initials that matched Elizabeth Barraza. But that protective name created serious problems later. The hospital staff didn't know who Liz really was, even while billing her insurance. Bob said it became a nightmare to sort out. Staff kept insisting there was no record of her under her real name. At the time, Sergio was living with them. He stayed with them about 9 months after Liz's death, and Bob tried to help him navigate the mess. They needed an itemized bill to work with, the insurance company, and prove the charges were legitimate, but the hospital refused to release it. Bob remembered the frustration, saying it got so bad they almost had to hire a HIPAA lawyer. He finally told the staff, "You know who my daughter was. You're billing her insurance company. Don't look at the name she was registered under. Look at her insurance information." A couple of months later, Sergio got an email from Memorial Hermann saying they needed him to come down and settle the bill. Bob had just returned to work after being unemployed for 8 months. Bob recalled Sergio calling him concerned about handling the hospital bill. Bob reassured him, "Just go down there, write the check, and take care of it." He reminded Sergio that he had the money, so there was no need to worry. In Bob's mind, he was simply trying to look out for Sergio the way Liz would have wanted him to. When Sergio went to the financial aid office, he was told he had to go upstairs to meet with the bursar's office. Sergio was confused, but Bob assumed it might just be about additional money. Maybe the bill was more than they were expecting. Bob advised him just to ask for a payment plan if it came to that, and promised to help Sergio sort it out. About an hour later, Sergio called back. He said he'd met with the hospital controller, who brought in 2 department heads, the leaders of both the children and the adult oncology unit. Together they explained that because of the name confusion, they had only recently figured out who Liz really was. And once they put the pieces together, they explained in unison that Liz's countless hours helping sick patients, along with her selfless service, had been more than enough to pay her bill. "You don't owe us a dime," they told him. Bob said the family was in awe that the hospital honored her service in that way, and it still means so much to them. After Liz's murder, the same community that she loved so much found a way to honor her. Just 2 months later, her friends formed a new squad of the 501st Legion, the South Side Griffins. It wasn't just a name, it was a tribute to someone they loved dearly. The imagery and the patches were built around Liz herself. The most striking was Rosie the Riveter, style design showing her in a biker scout uniform, flexing her arm in a classic pose with Diesel, her beloved dachshund, right beside her. Every time the patch appears on a jacket, a convention bag, or a fan's collection, it tells the world that Liz Barraza was loved by her friends, family, and community, and the fandom that brought them all together. The patch isn't just a design. It's a reminder of the joy she carried into every space she entered and the way people felt when they were around her. Even now, Liz's light continues to travel, stitched into fabric, shared in stories, and carried forward by those who refuse to let her be forgotten. In that same spirit, Bob and Sergio also worked on a Star Wars project together during those early months. It gave them a way to channel their grief into something creative while staying connected to the world Liz loved so deeply. One of the reasons that Liz's case has never gone cold is because her family started working with Crime Stoppers very early on. Just days after the murder, Liz's family stood before cameras at Crime Stoppers of Houston to announce the reward. Crime Stoppers offered $5,000, but the family, with the help of Peter Mayhew, raised an additional $15,000. For Bob, it meant so much more than the dollars. To have Peter's involvement showed that people outside of their circle, even someone as famous as him, cared about Liz and wanted justice for her. That early reward has since grown to $50,000 today. Around that time, Bob was introduced to Andy Kahn, Crime Stoppers' only full-time paid victim advocate and one of the most respected in the nation. Andy gave Bob advice that has guided him ever since, and in many ways has kept Liz's case alive. As Bob remembered it, Andy told me, "You are not a cop. If you think you're a cop, then we've got a problem. You have one job. Your job is to generate publicity and generate tips." That advice shaped how Bob approached the case, but he says advocacy alone would not have been enough. The other reason Liz's case has never gone cold is the relentless dedication of Detective Michael Ritchie. At the time of Liz's murder, Ritchie was a 5 or 7 year veteran of the Harris County Sheriff's Office with a track record of solving 90% of the cases. Liz's case is one of the only cases he hasn't solved, but Bob said Ritchie's commitment has never wavered. Ritchie worked on the case for about 18 or 19 months before being promoted to sergeant. Because there were no open homicide sergeant slots, the sheriff's office moved him over to patrol. But even then, he continued working Liz's case. Bob recalled how Ritchie often worked nights. As patrol sergeant, he would park in a safe lot to be ready for calls, and then use the time to think through Liz's case. At 10 o'clock, he would call the family and ask, "Are you still up? I've got a thought." To Bob, that kind of dedication showed just how tenacious Ritchie was. Even after his promotion, he eventually took Liz's case back, despite managing a squad of 6. To this day, the family talks with him regularly. Bob was supposed to be with Liz that morning at the garage sale. But the night before, he made a hard decision. He had been out of work for months, and instead of spending the day trying to make $100 selling odds and ends, he decided to stay home and focus on finding a job. He told me that was the last conversation I ever had with my daughter. Thursday night, he texted her to say he couldn't make it, that he needed to look for work. Overcome with grief, Bob could never bring himself to look back at those messages. For months, he never looked. But when he finally did, he saw Liz's reply. "That's okay, Dad. I understand. Just understand I'll be there all by my lonesome." Bob said reading her last words shattered him. Her final message to her father was that she would be there all by herself. And in his words, she was. As you know, Bob is going through a lot right now. And while he has to focus on his health, he told me that he also is going to continue fighting for justice and protecting his daughter's legacy, because that's just as important. Liz's legacy began with a tree. After Liz was murdered, one of her friends got permission from Commissioner Jack Cagle to plant a tree in her honor at her favorite park. Liz had spent countless hours there fishing with her dad and brother, taking her dog to the park, and snapping goofy photos. That was her park. On Liz's birthday that same year, the tree went in. Bob found himself visiting often, going there to recharge when his spirits were down and when he felt worn out, just to be close to her. Bob explained it this way. It's like brake pads after you reach about 80,000 miles. You have to add more abrasive to them, otherwise you can't stop the car. So standing at her tree gave him strength. But as time went on, Bob realized he needed something more. At the National Day of Remembrance, he approached Commissioner Tom Ramsey. Bob remembered telling him, "I'm going to be 67 next year. I'm too old to stand at a tree for an hour. I would really like your permission to put in a bench." Ramsey didn't just nod. He brought over one of his staffers right away and said, "This is Bob Nuelle. Give him your information and you two start talking. He wants a bench at his daughter's tree." In November, Bob met the staffer for coffee. Not long into the meeting, the staffer told him, "You've got your bench." Bob was stunned. He explained that he and his wife had even saved money to pay for it, but the staffer shook his head and said, "Tom said your problem is you think too small." Bob laughed when he remembered his reaction. He said, "I didn't understand what he meant." The staffer explained, "Tom owns 72 parks in his precinct. We are going to put a tree and a bench and a sign in all 72 parks. And you're going to help coordinate it, plan it, and set it up." They scheduled a planning meeting for December 5th at one of Tom's community centers. Ramsey told Bob to invite Crime Stoppers because he wanted them involved. Bob and Rosemary sat down with Crime Stoppers, the precinct staff, and together they mapped out the project because it was bigger than just Liz. It was a true community effort. So far, 3 benches have been placed, with a 4th scheduled for September, in honor of Jocelyn Nungare, the little girl killed by 2 men who should have never been set free on bond. Her mother, Alexis, was later honored at the State of the Union address. For Bob, each new bench is not just about remembrance, but about healing. He's so dedicated to the project that he told Alexis that even if he has to attend the dedication in a wheelchair or a hospital bed, he promises to be there. For Bob and the families who have lost loved ones, the benches mean more than just a place to sit. As he explained, the benches are important for one reason, and one reason only. They're not a cemetery. When you get a tree and a beautiful park, it's life. And the bench is a setting of healing, a place of repose. He often sits for hours at Liz's bench, and sometimes he says Liz meets him there. And while he sits there, he sees signs from Liz. Bob told me, "Liz is a signaler. She sends us constant signs. A cardinal, a monarch butterfly, a dragonfly landing on a friend's shoulder." He said, "I looked up and said, 'Thanks, Liz. I see you. I hear you.'" For Bob and his family, these signs are more than coincidences. They're reminders that Liz is still with them, not gone, but changed, still a force for good. She lets us know she's always around and that we're not without her, Bob said. We just don't get to hold her. And that's a huge part of what keeps us from falling apart, mentally and physically. We maintain a strong connection, not only with who she was, but who I think she is today. As we were wrapping up our conversation, Bob was kind enough to show me something he said that he doesn't share with everyone. You may or may not know what a Funko Pop is. I didn't. They're little cartoon-styled figurines. One of Liz's friends had taken 3 different pops, pulled them apart, and created a custom Liz Barraza pop. It's Rosie O'Donnell's head from Ghostbusters, the glasses from Harry Potter, the Stormtrooper body. They even put her number, TB93474, on the top. Bob explained, only 3 exist and he has one. He told me it's one of his most prized possessions, and honestly, it was adorable. He also showed me Liz's Harry Potter wand and shared another memory. Liz turned out to be an artist. When she got older, she taught herself Harry Potter calligraphy. She'd make Hogwarts letters for kids, real parchment, green ink, and wax seal, exactly like the movies. She loved giving them out. Then he smiled as he recalled something else. One time she came over and said, "Dad, look at my feet." She'd taken plain white sneakers and hand-drawn the Marauders map on them. She made pairs for herself and her friend Marcy when they went to Orlando. Over time, she made about 5 pairs. Bob said he still has 1 pair of them. They're beautiful. He didn't know that she could draw like that and was floored. She was a natural artist. Finally, Bob pointed to the tattoo on his arm. In Harry Potter books, the word always appears with 3 stars. Her friends copied Liz's handwriting, and Bob had it tattooed along with her wand and the Jawa costume. At least 12 of Liz's friends now carry the same tattoo. They carry her with them wherever they go, which is incredibly mind-boggling because most people might keep handwriting on a piece of paper, but to put it on your body, you really have to love someone. Liz touched people's lives so deeply. Then Bob shared one last detail. Just a week before her murder, Liz had been approved for her Jawa costume. She wanted to entertain kids, do a sleight of hand, even pretend to walk away with their mom's phone before giving it back with a laugh. One of her plans was to run and say, "Utani, Utani, where's your mama? Utani, Utani." Then she'd slip the phone out of her mom's hand and say, "Thank you," and walk off before handing it back. She was going to carry little coins in her pocket and give them to the kids. Bob said that was just classic Liz. I know a lot of people care about Liz's case, but not everyone has a tip. So what can you do? More than you think. One of the most powerful ways to help is simple. Share her story. Every time you repost on Facebook, Reddit, or somewhere online, you're putting Liz's name in front of someone new. It takes only one person in the right circle to recognize something or connect a dot that no one else has. And then there's the reward. Right now, it's at $50,000 for any information that leads to an arrest. That's life-changing money for someone. And the best part, it's paid out completely anonymously. I had heard of Crime Stoppers before, but I had no idea how easy it was to get paid if your tip helps solve the case. Here's how it works. When you call Crime Stoppers, they don't take your name, number, or even have caller ID. Instead, you're given a code, and that's the only identity you have. If your tip helps, you get paid. In Houston, you can walk into any Wells Fargo, you give them your code, and walk out with the cashier's check. No name, no ID, no photo, no fingerprint. That's it. The start-to-finish anonymity is why Crime Stoppers works. Bob said when someone you love is taken in such an evil way, you're left with grief, shock, and questions. The police do their job, but they can't tell you everything. They can't walk you through every step, and most of the time they won't share much at all because it isn't their role. Families like Bob are left wondering, what do we do now? Who do we talk to? How do we keep pushing forward? For Bob, the answer was Crime Stoppers. Andy Kahn, their lead advocate, counseled him and even invited him to speak at the Parents of Murdered Children National Convention in Las Vegas. There, Bob led a 90-minute workshop on reviving cold cases, sharing some of the very strategies he had created on his own. Andy admitted he hadn't even heard of some of Bob's ideas before. Practical tools like setting up Google alerts on 50 different case keywords, so every time Liz's name or details about her case appear online, he gets a notification. Bob forwards those alerts to his wife Rosemary and to Detective Michael Ritchie so nothing slips through the cracks. He also designed case cards, two-sided business cards with Liz's picture on the front and a barcode on the back that links directly to the Who Killed Liz Barraza website. And it also has Crime Stoppers tip information on it too. When Bob meets someone new, he can hand them a card. It's a small, simple, but powerful way that he can bring awareness to Liz's case. Because in the end, this is how the case gets solved. Somebody knows something. Maybe a relationship ends, maybe a secret slips out, maybe someone has a falling out with the person that hired them or carried out the hit. When that happens, the information has to be easy to find, easy to share, and impossible to ignore. That's why Bob has built the website, the alerts, the cards, tools that make Liz's case stay alive. And he isn't doing it alone. He has his wife, his son, his brother, Andy Kahn, and Sergeant Ritchie. And in his words, a team like you cannot imagine. One of Bob's closest friends is Kim Ogg, the former district attorney of Harris County. He talks with her almost every day. Together, they founded an organization called the Texas Crime Victims United, dedicated to fighting for the rights of victims and their families in the Texas legislature. Their work has already made a huge difference. This year alone, they saw 9 bills passed. Governor Greg Abbott even came to Houston to sign the bills in their presence, acknowledging the effort and determination it took to make the law better. Among those victories is a constitutional amendment that, for the first time, gives judges the authority to deny bail in what Bob calls the violent 5 crimes. In Texas, bail laws are written into state constitution, so the only way to change them is through an amendment. That's exactly what this new measure does. It allows a judge to look at a defendant and say, "You're too great of risk to society. No bail in your case." Before this, even the most violent offenders could only be given a high bond, maybe $1 million, but with the right lawyer, it could be negotiated down. Bob pointed out the devastating result. More than 200 Houstonians have been murdered by defendants who never should have been released on bail in the first place. That's why he's so proud of the work Texas Crime Victims United has accomplished. But to Bob, the real legacy is the laws are changing, not just for Liz, but for every family who deserves safety and justice. Before I close, I want to thank Bob. He told me that when pure evil comes into your life and takes a family member, you don't know where to turn or what to do next. And yet, in the middle of that kind of pain, he continues to fight for Liz's memory, for justice, and for other families who have lost loved ones. And now, this is where we all come in. If you've made it this far, if you can help share Liz's story, talk about her, post it on Facebook, Reddit, anywhere where people will see it. The more her name is out there, the better chance we have at finding the right person to hear this and have them come forward. Every share matters. Every conversation helps keep the pressure on. Let's stand with Liz's parents, make sure her story is heard, and keep pushing until there are answers, until there's real justice. So what I'm about to say is only my opinion, and it does not reflect the views of Bob or his family. It's hard to talk about Liz's case without mentioning Sergio, and that's why I feel it's important to say this part. I know many of you have questions about Sergio, and I have to admit I share those same concerns. What I personally struggle to understand are Sergio's actions in the hours that followed. He didn't go to the hospital. He stayed at the house. Several hours passed before he finally went to be by Liz's side. Think about that for a minute. As he drove home, he checked the security camera on his phone and admitted he heard Liz's scream and the gunshots. Upon arrival, he saw the blood on the driveway. He knew she had been shot multiple times. He also knew she had been life-flighted to the hospital. According to the police report, blood was even coming from Liz's mouth, a detail the neighbor who rushed to her side also witnessed and likely shared with Sergio. In that moment, most people would just get in the car and drive. Shocked, numb, overwhelmed, but still moving toward the hospital. So I can't wrap my head around why he didn't. What was he doing that was so important? I've read online that he stayed behind to care for their dachshund, but his mother was there. Neighbors were rushing over. There were options. And according to Sergeant Michael Ritchie, after being dismissed by police, Sergio didn't go straight to the hospital. He stayed around talking with neighbors and media. For me, that raises questions. I understand people argue that none of us can predict how we'd react in trauma, and that's true. The body can go into fight, flight, or freeze. Some people shut down completely. But in most cases, the instinct to move, to act, to get to your loved one would prevail. Even in shock, even numb, people often find themselves heading toward the hospital or wherever it is without thinking. That's why I can't make sense of it here. And for those who want to argue he was in shock, I have to ask, how was he able to stand around talking with neighbors and media? He seemed to be functioning fine. But even if he did freeze, he wasn't alone. His mom was there. If he couldn't move himself, why wasn't she putting him in a car and taking him to Liz? Maybe we'll never know. And it's important to remember the person responsible is not always the spouse. Maybe Sergio had nothing to do with it. But if that's the case, then I think it's fair to expect more from him, more interviews, more effort to raise awareness, more of a visible fight for Liz's justice. Because in the end, silence doesn't bring justice, and Liz's family deserves answers. Because at the heart of all of this is a father who lost his daughter. The little girl in these photos, his baby, his pride and joy, is gone, and nothing can ever bring her back. Every smile, every holiday, every silly moment frozen in these pictures is now only a memory. And that's the reality Bob lives with every single day. When he looks at these photos, he sees not only who Liz was, but all those years she had ahead of her. And that absence is what he carries with him. Liz was robbed of her future, and her family was robbed of her. If you know anything about Liz and her case, please call the Houston Crime Stoppers at 713-222-TIPS. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.